as prices increase, people get poorer. But here's a crazy statistic for you. In the year, I think it's about 1910. Yeah, forgive me if I'm out by a few years. I think it was 1910. There was a comparative study done between 1910 and 2010 of the average income of a person in the United States. And what was done was a study of income related to basic expenses, yeah? And the result of the study was that a single man working in the United States in 1910 had a greater average salary than two parents working in the United States in 2010. So a single man working, usually men for obvious reasons, in 1910 had more than double the disposable income of a family working in 2010. And the trend has been going continually down. The trend has been going continually down. Now, part of the reason of this is the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1912, 1913, the International Money Lending and Laundering Organization. But that has been the increasing trend, and the flip side is that more people have been raised out of poverty by a capitalist system which had a real free market than anything else previously, but the fight has been to sustain control of global economics, which has been the bank's issuance of currency to a greater extent, and that was followed then by the issuance of debt. And debt is now the problem, because in 1910, very, very, very few people were in debt. Very few people were in debt. You owned what you could buy. There was no other option open. Yeah. Now people are in debt, which is no different from indentured servitude, which is the system that existed in Europe around 300 years ago, where people who wanted to escape Europe to go to the United States couldn't afford to buy tickets to get to the United States. So what they did was they promised to work for a period of time in order to get ticket or transportation to the United States. It was called indentured servitude. They basically made themselves slaves in order to escape slavery. It's a bit of a contradiction, but that's the way it worked out. And recently I saw, I've had this conversation over the last year with a number of people. People have asked me, why is this happening? Why is that happening? And my answer has always been the same. People are in debt. People have bills to pay, right? People have bills to pay. And to pay your bill, to pay your house, to pay your car, to pay education costs, to pay life costs, to pay energies, you have to work, and to live to a certain extent, you have to borrow. And doesn't the Bible say, neither a borrower nor a lender be? Do not borrow money and do not lend money, because that's a trap. And the simple system has been to get everybody into debt and then to pull the finances from the system, make everybody panic, and then make everyone a slave. that's it. That's it. That's been the 100-year goal of the main financial system. To get everybody in debt, to pull all the financial resources. It's in the last book that I wrote. There's a chapter on it. Yeah. And suddenly when everyone's in debt and everyone has bills to pay, I say everyone, a lot of people will do whatever they are told because they need to keep their job. They absolutely need to keep their job because their job is everything that is keeping their life rolling and moving forward. Now, it's not always a bad thing, but when the choice is, this is a bit of a weird tangent here, but when the choice is, if you don't keep your job, or if you want to keep your job, we have to inject you full of these strange chemicals that nobody knows what they are. People are now saying, okay, inject me full of these strange chemicals, nobody knows what they are, so that I can keep my job. Which is a very, very strange place for humanity to be. When humanity believes that it's more dangerous to breathe air than it is to be injected with unknown chemicals, we are in a very, very, very strange place. And we're in this strange place because we're not thinking correctly. We're not thinking right. We're not finding the solutions that we need to find. Everybody's in a little box. And they're looking at this very, very narrow perspective of everything, which is, oh my God, if we don't follow the rules, the world will end. Climate protesters. I mean, the energy required to protest could be actually used as the energy to do something positive and good in the world. I mean, it's ridiculous. Not that protest isn't necessary. I think that protest is a right, but rights can be removed. Protest is a right, but it is probably better to be proactive and just go your own way than it is to follow such a system. And the bigger picture of things are there's more than enough resources in the world for everybody. There's more than enough energy in the world for everybody. There's more than enough. There's more than enough food in the world for everybody. We've got lots of everything. Got lots of water, for example. This is lots of water. And, you know, thanks to technology, we can process and make it clean. This is, you know, for humanity to go forward, we need more investment rather than less. It's all a big system of control through the issue of finance and debt. If you don't pay the bills, then you don't have anything. Maybe you go to prison or something as a terrible result. But to pay the bills, you go to work. But working doesn't give you all the money that you need to be free. What's the point anyway? It's a bizarre system where people are working to enslave themselves in the bigger picture, and it's a psychological problem because, as I mentioned earlier, it's about finding solutions to problems. We can only find solutions to problems if we're free to think and have real diversification, which is traveling in different directions and building other companies. That's real diversification. It's not gender diversification within the company. That's not real diversification, right? That's a twisted view of things, and so there's a giant energy crisis everywhere, and the energy crisis is squeezing society, making it very, very difficult for business, and it's creating conflict. There's a conflict between the bigger companies and the governments now, with the bigger companies saying, we'll just leave. And the government saying, okay, go, where are you gonna go? And the company saying, I don't know, we'll find somewhere. But look, almost everywhere, the same thing is happening, unfortunately. There are a few shining lights of practicality and sense and freedom. For some reason, Sweden has been a little bit of a shining light over the last year in terms of business and policy, keeping things as open as possible. Unfortunately, they've opened their border as well and let in a lot of problems that perhaps shouldn't have been let in. But we've got massive problems. Luckily for Central Europe, you're the middle of a giant landmass with a lot of different cultures, and that creates part of the friction of progress by pointing out the fact that everything is different, but different is okay. If you are a one-dimensional island, right, as Britain or Australia or New Zealand, then you've got a bit of a problem, because everybody seems to think that communism is the only way to solve every problem. And that's not that's not right. We haven't learned anything if we're pushing that and realizing that we're creating a debt crisis for all people in all areas, because we're limiting production, we're limiting distribution, and it's going to be bad this winter. It's going to be bad because the transportation crisis hasn't even started yet. You know, just look at a picture of international shipping and the number of boats waiting to deliver goods. It's slowing down. And if it stops, then there will just be another crisis for everybody. In fact, the only growing industry is essentially the technical industry at this moment in time, which is stupid because we all need practical resources to live. You know, food, clothes, all the nice things in life are sort of, you know, developed and packaged, and people like to spend their income on gifts and sharing and going out and doing stuff. There was a recent robbery that I read about where thieves now are not stealing money, they're stealing microchips now. Like the largest commodity in the world is actually microchips.
Sure.
And thieves are not stealing money from banks. They're not robbing. They're not doing that anymore. They're actually stealing microchips. which is a whole new perspective to try and understand. Children are not seeing cash. Children are growing up not seeing any money at all. All they see is credit cards and plastic. And that's fantasy currency. I'm not saying it's not practical. I mean, obviously, obviously it has a lot of sense. You know, there's great practicality in the credit card. It's a difficult world to reorientate ourselves towards. Not, and it's something that children will do faster than the adults. But the adults are in control. But the adults are old. How many people, 60, 70 years old, are still 50, 60, 70 years old, are still running big businesses internationally and trying to run them the same way they did 20, 30 years ago? Can't be done anymore. Can't be done, sadly. So it's definitely a very difficult environment to grow within, and people are really going to have to change the way they think, and that's not going to happen easily, and it's not going to happen by force either. In the next 6 months, when everybody gets sick and all the hospitals are overrun, maybe people will start to think differently, or maybe they won't. Maybe they'll be even more scared. Yeah. Fear creates more fear. More creates more, less creates less. I think that the most important thing is, here's a bizarre way to finish, the most important thing is just to be happy. Right? And look at that element and focus on what causes me the least amount of stress. Not that we shouldn't do things that challenge us, but we shouldn't involve ourselves in things that we have no control over, to a certain extent, which I think a lot of people have realized, and they've disengaged from certain elements of the system and are usually happier as a result of doing that. But it's hard. It's really hard right now. For everybody's scared. Sorry to focus on that. Everyone's scared. Those 1,000 people that you talked about in that town that are employed by that big company, they could all lose their jobs, and then their families have no money, and they won't be able to pay for a place to live. And what then? I mean, it's frightening. It's a frightening scenario. Yeah. Not to mention the problems with distribution and raw materials as well. I don't know. It's wild. It's a good time right now to disconnect, diversify your thinking, and both take a step back from everything to see the bigger picture and move forward in a way that works for you. You know, it sounds like a contradiction to step back and move forward at the same time, but I mean, you've got to see the bigger picture and still take action with things. Hard times to navigate, but that's where we learn. You know, we learn who we are. When we're faced with challenges, we learn who we really are. Are we good enough to solve these problems or not? We learn who we really are. So this is, you know, it's a good time to discover who your friends are. You know. Yeah, because when the shit hits the fan, you know, sometimes people change sides. It's hard.